Exactly a year ago, around this time, coronavirus entered into our life and changed everything around us. Little did we know that this will lead to a lockdown, which will actually lock all of us into our homes. And from office to school, everything will come either into a mobile or a laptop or a computer for everyone. It's been a year. Many students, not just in India, but across the world, haven't even seen their schools, and those with access to technology are able to study from home, but there are many, especially those living in the rural part of the country, have not been able to continue their education, and it's going to be more than a year now. And they are just waiting for things to become normal, for their schools to reopen. And this has further widened the already existing education gap in our country. And that's going to be our focus today on Hitachi Social Innovation Forum 2021. What really can be done to bridge the education gap of India?
And joining us today on day two of this first session is Major Harsh Kumar, who is Secretary in CERT. We also have with us Mr. Vivek Nayak, who is former UN diplomat and board member, National Stock Team. We are also very honored to have with us Professor Sankarshan Basu, who is from IIM Bangalore. He's professor in finance and accounting area at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. And lastly, we have with us Mr. Partha Mohanty, who is here, who will be providing us with some kind of innovative solutions using technology, how we can bridge this education gap in India. He is, in fact, the principal architect of the education portfolio for the group that is catering to requirements of all stakeholders. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on this very special panel discussion. Let me begin this discussion with Major Harsh Kumar, Secretary NCRT. Sir, in your opinion, how badly has coronavirus impacted the education system in India? How much do you think it has further widened the gap between the rural and the urban education sector?
First of all, very good morning, good afternoon to everybody, and thanks for inviting me here to so that I can share what NCRT is doing and what is the scenario from this side. First of all, I take this pandemic as an opportunity rather than a challenge, because this has given us a picture where we have shown our preparedness to face this pandemic on all aspects. If we come on the educational aspect, I must salute my teachers, the entire teaching fraternity of all over our country. They have coped up with this situation. They have adapted to this situation. However, as pointed out, that there has been gaps because of the infrastructure problem. And we have got such a visionary leadership that we have started many things on digital front, and that we were able to face this. And during this pandemic, to tell you, NCRT, within 2 weeks we have presented alternative calendar for the secondary, for the primary education, and then for the secondary education. So there was a time of challenge, but we have coped up. And as the our conversation progresses, we will be getting inputs also from the other esteemed panelists. And as far as I am concerned, I see this that there, as it has been given in your paper also, and it is a known truth that it will be a mix of kind of education which is going to survive uh, later now onwards. But having said this, there is no alternative to face teaching, uh,
Okay.
so that the maximum, the aim of education is to become a human being. And until and unless there is a human face, there is a human platform, you cannot expect a child to come to that level. These aids are just to empower us and not to
Hmm.
overpower us. So
Okay. Mr. Patnaik, I wanted you to address this issue of the startling numbers that we've got. 286 million students in India were impacted due to the pandemic.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this session. And I heard Major Secretary of the NCRT, and I fully agree with him. It is certainly not a challenge, an opportunity. And effort has been made to address the challenge. And it is a fact that schools have been closed. People have not been able to pursue their students, particularly the young children, but the age group of 3 to 5 who are in school. And they were asked to stay behind. Well, how to revive the education, that's a big challenge. I agree with you. Certainly is a worrisome thing, but no reason as to why we should be so frustrated. We have seen ourselves that we have tremendous ability of resilience. And I think Secretary to NCRT was right. We have. Having said so, my view is that I would like to take a view for the next 25 years and 50 years. Being myself 78, I've seen half century of India's growth, whatever it is. I remember the end of the Second World War. Believe me,
Yes.
I remember the end of the Second World War. So, well, this kind of things will come and go. And in the next 25 years, what will happen? Next 50 years, what will happen? One must plan for it. The time will pass in nobody's business, honestly. I have seen how time has flown in my time. I joined civil service in 1966. Can you imagine what kind of
Yes.
means of communication I had? I was using telephone if I had to talk to district magistrate as a sub-collector. And I
But
used
coronavirus
using
has brought our schools, colleges,
yes,
workplace,
yes.
everything to a computer,
Yeah. I
mobile phone.
remember
Who would have thought that something like this will happen?
yeah, pigeon service I was using to communicate with my Tahsildar across the river Mahanadi in Spate. So from that time onwards, I've seen how the progress is taking place. First, technology is moving, which is a very good thing. And now the students at that age group, I personally feel that age group, I'm talking first focusing on the students of the age group 30 and 5 who have been deprived very badly. Let them be given some basic fundamental education, like
Okay.
be truthful, be ethical, etc. And that is best provided at home. That means the parents must be also given some training, and the teachers who are being inducted, they should be also given such training at this stage. Because if you want to see India a prosperous country by 2040 or 2070,
Yes.
we have to pick them up at this stage. Okay. I think you would like to take some views from others at this stage. Otherwise, I can
Yes,
go on.
yes, absolutely. Yes, sir. Of course, an all-round approach is something that's the need of the hour. Professor Basu, in your assessment, how much do you think coronavirus impacted the education system in India, and why it is very, very important now to address this issue?
Okay, my first response is that we overreacted. And if I look at India today, after all the unlocks, and however much, I mean, it might sound contrarian, but the only two sectors which are still at home, interestingly, are the colleges, not even the schools, because some part of the schools have reopened, are the colleges and the IT sector. Very funnily. And the IT sector, I guess, will not come back because they've figured out working from home is an economically viable option. Leaving that out, coming back to the education sector, I think there's been a huge impact in the education sector across the board, from schools to colleges to everybody. I think there's a basic discipline that comes into the picture from at a pre-primary, as what we would call as kindergarten kids. They can, all of us as kindergarten kids, there was this whole idea of love to go to school because of the social interaction. We have to understand
Yes.
that education is not just like reading 5 books or doing some PowerPoints and things like that. A lot of us actually learn from that social interaction with our friends. And today when all of us can look back and we have friends from kindergarten days, and that kind of social interaction, and I think what this could potentially lead to while technology has definitely helped bridge one part of the gap to some extent, and as the Secretary NCRT said that by no means is a face-to-face interaction. I mean, a technology and a substitute to face-to-face interaction. I completely agree with him. But the point is that we have not addressed the social problem. And then that could kind of over a period of time lead to a much larger problem. We can get probably brilliant, academically brilliant individuals, but will they be assets to the society? Will they be a social individual? We might get individual performers, but can they collectively perform? And that is going to be the biggest challenge if this has to be continued.
That is exactly the reason why on the panel today we've got people from different background who understand, how we can find solutions to this problem, because this is for our future, for the children of our country who tomorrow are going to be leading the country, who will help India become that 5 trillion economy. Mr. Mohanty, let me now take your opening comments as well. How grave is the situation according to you, and what role can technology really play? Because as Basu was mentioning, that if we talk about 286 million students who were impacted because of coronavirus, almost 60 to 70% would be in the rural part of the country, which does not even have electricity, most of it, and forget about the internet.
Thank you so much. I thank all of the panelists. Basically, the situation is grave, but I would like to quote one, statement here. It says, two persons look out of prison bars. One sees the mud, the other sees the stars. So this pandemic is actually blessing in disguise for some, curse in disguise for few other people, right? So we have to see what was the scenario prior to this pandemic, okay? And we had this panel discussion prior to pandemic versus post-pandemic. What is the thought force that we are coming up with, and what is the innovation that we have brought about, whether it is policy level or at implementation level? The current situation is we are being reactive to the situation, wherein we are, trying to build policies and trying to implement things in a haste. That can be done away with, because we need to calm down. We need to see, as Professor Basu was saying, and Mr. Bhatnaik was also saying, Major Harsh also mentioned, we have to look at a holistic way of developing our future citizens, right? But coming from a technology background, we built one of its kind education e-governance framework. It is very pertinent for us to understand teaching learning is not limited to teachers and students. There is a complete ecosystem. And we actually coined the term called STAMP, expanded its students, teachers, alumni, management, and parents. Management here connotes not just the institutional management, but the complete directorate, the education system of our country. Now, whenever we are setting up policies and we want those policies to be implemented, we have to take the entire ecosystem, all the stakeholders into consideration before we start seeing some benefits, outcomes, best practices, and bring them back onto the ecosystem to evolve as we go together. So this particular aspect that we had taken up, and we have large installations here in India and abroad, we have to give importance to all the stakeholders at one go. I'll also address the number that Tina is mentioning, 286 million. Now, if our country has a large population, for sure, a country has large population of students, right? And how do we devise policies? Just by getting frightened or threatened by the number? Are we ready to gear up to address such a huge population? Now, the one answer that I think is technology can be a good enabler. It is never going to be a substitute. But when we talk of any conventional education system, a teacher also needs to be equipped with the right infrastructure, with the right training, with the right understanding, awareness, passion to deliver whatever we call as teaching learning through this techno and the gizmo stuff that we're trying to push down the throat to the teachers of the rural part of the country. I've interacted with village teachers also during this pandemic. They have a very cardinal question. You might give us free laptops, free mobiles, but is it part of our teacher training program at the block level, at the district level, at the panchayat level? So sitting in the metros, it might sound very easy. It might sound that the policy is very futuristic, but we also got to look at the rudimentary challenges of our country, give importance to the grievance and the feedback system, and then evolve with a conducive mechanism of teaching learning rather than expecting that 286 million, and this is a very large number, how do we need to address? There are certain things that we have done. I would like to give an example also. We presented this to Ministry of Health, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and by God's grace, we are doing one particular aims in our country. You see, the experience and the knowledge and the capability that you find in metros, especially at AIIMS Delhi, the pitch was that a very senior, experienced person in the education spectrum is delivering a talk on anatomy, on physiology, on biochemistry, in the Prof 1, in the first year of medical education. That can be completely video recorded, and that can be hosted onto a cloud, a secured environment. Rest of the country and the medical fraternity can gain access to that particular topic. And then a separate dedicated session, college by college or cluster of colleges, can also ask questions and get answers from the faculty who had actually delivered this and which got video recorded, uploaded it to a government site, so that students and teachers of those colleges can interact with a well-established institution and with a very reputed faculty in our country. That is one way to bridge the technology and deliver what otherwise it's extremely difficult, even in normal circumstances, not just pandemic, it becomes very difficult to ensure that MCI affiliated colleges will have doctors of equal elan, and they'll be able to perform without no problem. The last point that I want to cite is about school education.
Right.
I kept reading the new education policy again and again and again. There's a huge emphasis on multilingual system, right? If you teach a student in vernacular medium, in the native language, let's say Orissa or Assam, Kerala or Gujarat, right? If the student has spent 5 years or 6 years or 7 years in the local dialect, in the vernacular medium, how on earth do you expect a student to be abreast with English terminology? Pardon me for saying this, I'm not a student of biology and found it very hard to remember the terms in biology, right? So I'm away from biology for the last 30 plus years. So what I'm trying to impress upon is policies are good, but the teachers and the policy makers and the syllabi that we have, all these things also need to be addressed in order to ramp up and be ready for a futuristic country like India with 26 billion students.
I think you raised a very interesting point, and I will get Major Harsh Kumar to respond to the concerns that you've raised. But before that, I would like to invite our viewers as well to participate in this particular discussion. In fact, we have a poll question for our viewers to join in too. My question is, due to the pandemic, education has moved largely to computers and laptops. Has this changed for good? Your options are yes or no. Do participate and share with us your views as well as we try to find solutions to address this widening education gap in our country. Let's go back to the discussion that we're having. Of course, even as we are waiting for our viewers to join in and participate in this particular first poll question of the panel, Major Harsh Kumar, will you like to address some of the concerns that have been raised by Mr. Mohanty?
Yes, ma'am, definitely. What Patnaik sir has said, and we had said this point earlier also, that school, it is not the only place where a child learns. The environment where he stays, his home, his friends, these all are the places. School is one of the place of learning and a very important place of learning. Until and unless you have interaction, you cannot understand yourself. Just by staying alone, you cannot understand yourself. And the problem which is coming today by laptops, tablets and phone, that even a small kid, I have also got kids, young, very young kid, my younger is studying in second class, and I'll tell you that they open the YouTube, they go to the sites other than studying, they have lost interest in playing. So this is a huge problem. And being an army personnel also, and I all play and all study and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and that is what is happening today. The children are not coming to the ground. They are so much interested in all those games which is going. And I was surprised to, I was in a party 2 days back, in a marriage party, where the adults were involved in playing games. So this is a very unhealthy situation which has come. This has to
Mr.
be
Mohanty,
checked.
those are some valid concerns that have been raised. I want you to give a quick response, then I'll go across to Mr. Patnaik.
Uh,
Yes,
Basically, I'll tell you. Okay, please.
Yes, Mr. Mohanty, 30
Hina, you
seconds,
want
then
me to
I'll go
give
to
my
Mr.
reflection?
Patnaik.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. Because you see, what Major Harsh has mentioned is a ground level reality. But you will have to look back how Major Harsh was involved in a regular situation, whether he was overseeing his children's studies or not. It is not just technology has created a barrier. If we show interest in a normal situation, the students will learn, as there's a famous saying which says, do not worry, your children are not listening to you. Worry, they are constantly observing you. Right after the pandemic is over, suddenly the surveillance is gone. So one, instance, one short-term impromptu response might not solve the problem for a country like ours. We need to see
Hmm.
technology as an enabler, as a facilitator, not a substitute by any standard, not today, not after 100 years. There are specific aspects of technology which augment the teaching learning mechanism. We are restricted to a classroom for 40 minutes or 50 minutes or 1 hour at most. What do we do for the remaining 8 or 12 hours that is at hand for the students, for the
Hmm.
teachers? That means if students do not have the courage to ask questions to teachers during the classroom, they have enough
Hmm.
opportunity to go rehearse and go after that subject again and again. They are more
Right.
prone to understanding and will ask conducive questions and motivate the
Hmm.
teachers to get back to them. That is how the
Okay.
education standard can grow. That is my
Okay.
2 cents.
I, I'll
I don't
just
think
take a
Mr.
minute.
Major Harsh Kumar. Okay. Okay. Yes. Very quickly, so that I have to take
Just
another
a
poll
minute.
question.
I'm not opposed to use of technology and all, and we have to keep ourselves abreast with the technology. And if you see, the SWAM platform, which is providing NCRT PM's e-Vidya program, we are running class
Hmm.
1 to 12 channel, which is continuously running for class 1 to 12. We have got 12 channels, and we every day we give a fresh program of 2 hours. So I'm not
Okay.
against the technology at all, but what I am saying, my bottom line is that it has to be in a controlled manner, and we have
Okay.
to provide it in the distant villages that will
Hmm.
cut off the infrastructural things and all. So I'm not against
Hmm.
that, but what
I
I'm
think
saying
that
that
is where Hitachi can provide customized solutions so that technology actually becomes an enabler. We'll be talking about those solutions in just a bit. Stay on with us, all of you. I want to take one poll question for all our viewers at this point in time. And my question is, how will you rate the new education policy, good or bad? Do participate, and that is now going to be the key focus of our discussion as well at this point in time. Mr. Vivek, and I want to ask you, how do you see the new education policy and the role of technology? Because, I believe it does emphasize the importance of online education. In a way, integrated solution is what it talks about. Do you think that is going to help us bridge this gap?
yes, thank you. I have had the occasion to go through the new education policy in quite great details and also have participated in number of webinars and seminars since then. Well, it's an excellent document and it's based on the previous documents and which is modified and it's in line with the present thing in the world. Having said so, I would like to say policy is policy. Implementation is important. So for implementation, if you want to bring technology, naturally you have to create infrastructure. That infrastructure means if you, particularly in the context of bridging the divide, you must have access to the rural world through either through Wi-Fi or through fiber optics mode, whatever it is, that should be provided by the government. The government has to take the initiative. Then, of course, the government can outsource it and give it to private sector to do things, but initiative has to come from the government. Second, as regards the question that was going on with regard to technology as well as the individual misuse of technology, I think that matter has been well settled between the two by Dr. Harsh Sharma and also Dr. Mohanty. Well, I would like to say here one thing. The, at the at the school level, at the young school level, the teaching of morals is very important. The question, what is right, what is wrong,
Hmm.
which Major mentioned. And I said, see, he pointed out the problem with his own child. So which means this basic fundamental must be taught, and that is at home as well in the school and other places also. But you cannot control other places, but certainly in the school as well as at home. And the teachers themselves must be also given, inculcated with that kind of moral values. You should understand
Hmm.
that. I feel it's a good start. We will start, and government must take the initiative. And I
Hmm.
personally feel that we should have a long-term view, a view for the next 25 years and 40 years. The children of today will be the leaders tomorrow in no time, and 25 years will
Yes.
pass and see. Zifi, this is my experience, having seen how the time has passed. So I thought of
Hmm.
mentioning this. I've got other points to mention as and when you will ask me the
Yes.
question. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Those were really, really important points that you mentioned. Professor Basu, now, we can't really have a system like used to be before coronavirus came into our lives. We will have to adopt some kind of a hybrid approach. I believe you will agree to this. What are the specific areas where you think technology can play a role at this point in time as far as India's education sector is concerned? Because unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures, and it has happened once, it can happen again as well. So we need to be prepared. And like Mr. Patnaik was mentioning, that we need to now plan for the next 25, 30 years.
So, I mean, I completely agree with you that we live in very challenging times, and therefore we don't know what's happening, and then we need to plan. Having said that, I think the dropping away or kind of arguing that we can't go back to the old format is also not entirely correct, because the rest of the world does seem to have gone back. Yes, you've seen some backlash in the UK, but they did go back. The US has gone back. China has gone back where it all started. Korea has gone back. So all the major countries have actually gone back to the old system and are trying to kind of create and use technology as a part of the tool. So to that extent, to say that we can't really go back to the old system, or there is some obvious limitation of going back to the old system, is something which I, at least at this point, do not subscribe to. I think
No, I'm not saying
it's
that. Okay, I'm not saying that it's about going back to the old system completely. That's not my question. My question is, do you think probably a hybrid approach is something that's the need of the hour? Because if people are able to continue their education using a computer, a mobile phone, or a laptop, then why not have a hybrid model? Because it will have wider reach,
it,
don't you think?
It will. I mean, it's a trade-off. So I think the answer to that is, to me, it is a trade-off. It does give you a reach, but reach at what cost is the whole question. I mean, so essentially, do I need the brick and mortar schools, or can I kind of say no? I will kind of take it completely hybrid. I mean, or at least half of it and reduce the time and all of that kind of stuff. To do that, first of all, even if it's possible, I think the very first point that you started off the whole discussion with, is something which is still important. Does the majority of this country, we sitting in Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Bhubaneswar, wherever we are, that do we? How much of the country do we represent? And therefore, if that last guy on the street doesn't have access to any of this, then I think the process fails, because then you're kind of creating a larger divide. Few of us will always have access to the whole process, but then you're actually creating another, I mean, a second class citizen kind of a story that's kind of getting created. Uh, Inadvertently maybe, but that's what's going to create it. So I think one of the things that biggest challenges of doing a hybrid model is to kind of build up on that, and kind of say that, okay, do we have the infrastructure? I mean, what the hybrid will do today to today's or the next generation is what reference books and libraries did to us and generations prior to us, in that sense.
Hmm.
Today the kids don't go to the library, they can just Google and get the information. So I think that's where the benefit will come in, and they'll have access to a
Okay.
lot more. Obviously, one benefit that comes in, and that's what Mr. Mohanty also mentioned in just a second, is that today we obviously have access to a large number of. So if I'm teaching in Bangalore and if some small college somewhere wants to kind of have me speak, it's just a question of just logging in. So to that extent, the
Hmm.
access increases. But can I do everything in that model? And the answer is no. Therefore, I think we should actually be very, very clear what can be done and what cannot be done, and take a view that not everything can be done. We know that, and, and therefore work towards that. I think that has to be the
Okay.
model that we need to adopt.
I think you've raised some very valid
Yeah, I
and
want.
very, very important points. I want to go across to Mr. Mohanty now. What can be done? Why don't you give us a few examples to help
Yeah,
our viewers also understand what is it that can be done? Of course, it can't change completely. We cannot have a school for a student in a laptop, in a computer, in a mobile phone. It has to be a hybrid model. But then how?
correct. You see, one of the things Professor Basu was mentioning, I want to add a corollary onto that. You see, during the pandemic, everybody said you can use your parents' mobile phone, you buy a mobile phone, try to understand, raise your hands, ask questions, then you go through the digital content, so on and so forth. First point that I want to address here is the syllabus changing because of the pandemic? I don't think no syllabus, whether it's CBSE, ICSE, state education boards, I keep abreast as much as possible. Now, if during the pandemic, even in futuristic tense, if we are going to build a hybrid model, our syllabus is never going to change. Now, the point is, every school of the country is saying for the final examination, you'll have to come to the schools, offline examination has to take place, pen and paper. Step back and question, if digital board is so effective, so meaningful, why don't you have online, laptop based test of whatever was delivered in the digital medium? The students also need to take the digital medium to be evaluated upon. That is one. Second, what I was trying to explain, you know probably 10 or 15% of the students who pay attention during the 40-minute classes, especially in schools, have the courage because they pretty much do their homework. Either they are self-sufficient, they are guided by their parents, they come back to the school, the next class, they ask few questions, and the others feel demotivated because they are not being able to cope up with the standard of language used or communication medium or the interpretation. They refrain from asking questions. Now think about those students wherein technology will enable. Now what had happened is EduSat way back in 90s, let's say. Now, EduSat has been certain, and Alaska 1974, as far as imparting education to Alaskan population, the students, they just can't come out of the igloos. The point is, if there are certain digital medium of communication, it is beamed through TVs, and those students who cannot afford smartphones, they at least understand what is going on in the school, can always be, checked upon or rehearsed upon before they actually go into the examination hall. That is an enabler. Secondly, teachers, if they understand how the digital medium has orchestrated the examples that is cited in the book through the digital medium, if the teachers also start talking in the language as the language, because the language mostly, being recorded is of an expert, an MBA from some Ivy League, right? But the teacher does not speak that language. So we have to come down to Mother Earth and try to understand. The teacher is using some very local examples that befits that particular locale, those students, the economic background. That is how we'll be able to permeate to the larger section of our student community. So make a mix. I completely agree with Professor Basu, but I want to add the corollary, again reiterating, the syllabus and the policymakers and the education department also need to ramp up, and they should recognize that we have to ramp up our syllabus or revision of the syllabus if we were to look forward for 10 years or 20 years since. That is my view.
Okay. I think Major Harsh Kumar also wanted to respond to that. So I'll come to you in just a bit. I have one more question, in fact, for our viewers that I want to just quickly put out. The question is related to what we've discussed, and that's why we're taking it right now. Are digital learning platforms enough for students to learn? You can choose between yes or no. Do participate and share with us your views as well on this very, very important issue of learning by digital platforms. Yes, Major Harsh Kumar, a lot is being said about syllabus and how you also need to work towards that aspect, policy aspect of it. How will you like to respond to Mr. Pant?
See, I don't know if you have gone through what CBSE has been doing for the examination and all, but definitely the pattern has been changed. And obviously, the students of class 10th and 12th, they have to appear offline. Rest of the students, they are that has been left on the schools how they can conduct, keeping up the whatever the caution they have to keep, and they are taking online tests. So it is not that schools they have come up to the situation very well. I must appreciate our schools with the limited infrastructural facilities, and with the limited training of the teachers also, they have adapted to the situation. I really thank and salute to our all teachers, whether in the primary education, secondary education, or higher education. The students are continuously being taught. It has not
Hmm.
stopped, and you'll surprised to know that even visitors from other countries, they are coming in to see the situation of country like India. With we are keeping abreast with the situation, like Patnaik said, sir has said, and we have to look that how our policy will be implemented. And in our policy, with the policy which has come, it is a unique in a manner in which all aspects has been taken care of. All this
Okay.
digital education and all has already been taken care of before the pandemic. It was all
Okay.
in the open platform. The suggestions were pouring from the country, and
Hmm.
obviously we are keeping this, and definitely
Hmm.
technology will have to be there for the next century's skills, and that is
Okay.
being kept from class 6 onwards, the technology teaching and all those things. So it is not that government is not paying attention, and I'll say that such an attention has never been paid on the
Okay.
primary and secondary education like it is being done now.
Okay.
Right from the early childhood care and education, which has been taken care for the first time. First
Hmm.
time
Hmm.
a policy was there in open for the suggestions from all the stakeholders. And all
Okay.
these aspects are being taken care of. Implementation will take time, because
Okay.
overnight you cannot change everything.
Okay. Professor
Thank you.
Basu also wanted to make a point. 10 seconds, sir. Then I'll go
Yeah,
across to other guests as well. Yes, only 10 seconds.
I I just want one point. Mr. Major Harshkumar is right. Education is happening. But what I also
Hmm.
understand, education is a two-way street. Teaching is happening. I do not know the assimilation that's happening. I do not know what's happening across the screen, because at best I see some blurbs on my laptop screen, or even if I have a blow up screen, I just see like 75, 90 blurbs. I don't know what's happening on the other side. Yes, I completely agree, and I give it to all my colleagues, and colleagues, not my colleagues, because they are kind of the privileged lot, but colleagues, as Major Harsh Kumar has said, in the schools, in remote areas,
Hmm.
kindergarten teachers. I give it to them, and I literally, salute them, that the amount of effort that they put in. I have friends that I see them do every day, and I saw them work through it in the months of April and early May, when things were completely fluid. The amount of effort that
Yes.
people have gone through, and elderly people on the verge of retirement, and the amount they've put in. So I completely agree that that side has happened, and we've really built up a huge repository on that side.
Question for Mr. Mohanty. I have very little time, sir. Mr. Patnaik.
Oh, yes, yes, I will not take much time. First, the question of technology has come in, and
Hmm.
the question adoption of technology has come in. And Professor Basu very rightly said the reality is something than what is ideal. The technology should also adapt itself to the reality. There are
Okay.
ways of doing it. And this is a thing which I think Hitachi should take note of it. And the
Hmm.
experts and technical research people, they should take note of it, how to adapt themselves to the reality. At the same
Hmm.
time, since we are in the real world, we have to find how to meet the situation. We
Hmm.
can't throw the baby with the bathwater. Because the baby is crying, we just can't throw the baby with the bathwater. We have to how to do it. Resource. Resource mobilization is very important. Yes, resource mobilization, government alone cannot do it. You have to encourage the
Yes.
private sector to come forward. You have to encourage non-governmental organizations to come forward. It's a mobilization of everybody to meet this challenge. Then next question is, as regards the subject of the basic and fundamental education, and in
Hmm.
the education policy that is mentioned, let us try to concentrate on things like, to
Hmm.
to bridge the divide, concentrate on things like how to make students be inquisitive, innovative,
Hmm.
how, I mean, how they should not go by the beaten track. how to go off the beaten
Hmm.
track, Then you see, secondly,
Absolutely.
how to be cooperative, not individualistic, You see, team approach. This is very
Hmm.
important. What we say in Africa, Ubuntu approach. I'm sure
Hmm.
many of you are knowing about Ubuntu. This is very important. This is how it can be inculcated. Of course, in the
Hmm.
school, also college, elsewhere. I thought I
Yes.
should put this into the discussion uh, at this stage.
Very
Thank you very
rightly
much.
said, sir. And public sector, of course, alone can't do it. It needs probably public-private partnership. Mr. Mohanty, I want you to give us the closing comments and specifically talk about this Sana Darpan, the program that Hitachi has right now, and how is it really helping India bridge some of the gaps?
Very good question, and thanks for raising the question. We started this project around 5 years back for a student population of around 15 lakhs and close to 1 lakh teachers. Now, we have built one of its kind integrated educational e-governance framework for all central schools of our country, which is having around 29 regional offices, headquarters at Delhi. So all these schools with all the students' data, as I mentioned, 14 to 15 lakh students. So our platform actually addresses not just year-on-year performance. We look at a
Hmm.
life cycle database being created for every student over a span of 12 years. So what happens is parents, uh, respond or react to the performance of one particular class, wherein our integrated technology solution has brought in a paradigm shift onto the thinking process of the teachers, the counselors, the parents, and the students. It's a collaborative platform. You can see, go back in
Hmm.
time and check on the performance graph of class 6, 7, 8, 9. By the time the student reaches class 10, parents being engineers or science graduates, they would definitely like their child to pick up science as a stream in class 11. Now, the
Hmm.
history of the performance in academics shows something else because he's been good in art subjects, he's been participating in dramatics and writes very good essays and debates. So what happens is technology becomes an enabler. It will, trigger you to think and try to analyze the true strengths of the student. Accordingly, you will
Hmm.
be able to channelize his strengths onto the right stream. Now, technology helping you, not substituting or intruding into a
Right.
decision-making process. By that, what I mean, we keep doing surveys and research in various states. One state
Hmm.
reported that they have allocated a budget of 50 crores for the upgradation
Hmm.
of the science laboratories in the state, at a state level, 50 crores. Now, that state reported that grade 12 of that particular year had attracted
Hmm.
around 75% students who opted for arts and
Hmm.
undergraduate arts, and 15% in commerce, and the remaining 10% or so in science. Now, there is no
Right.
data assimilation other than year on year, which every government does. So you need a technology platform to take you back in time and see the performance pattern of a particular state. Forget about the country. So the technology
Hmm.
platform enables all the stakeholders, directly, indirectly, to sit together and analyze, then take the right decision for
Hmm.
the state, for the student, for the society. So this is how
Absolutely.
technology will be able to help you. Yeah, and the other
Yeah.
things which I was trying to highlight is like MIT has launched their online program years back, and none of their
Hmm.
programs is at cost. We think that if it is our IPR, we should not publish it on the internet world. So there are many, many leading
Right.
universities in the world, except in the engineering degree, let's say, they have this. One last example
Right.
about group of doctors from Boston. The name of the group is Visible Body. Now, what happens for a
Okay.
medical student when he goes to the clinical lab, he sees a mannequin, right? And the professor faculty is going to explain. It's a two-dimensional thing. You can't tear apart because there'll be batches of students. Now, what Visible Body
Hmm.
has done, it has turned the clinical labs onto a completely 3D clinical lab. And if they are
Okay.
talking about respiratory system, you can view that, or you can highlight a particular portion inside the body. You can zoom in, you can annotate, you can
Hmm.
rotate it, you can do a whole lot of things which is otherwise
Hmm.
impossible to a very age old practice of having a mannequin and
So
taking
clearly,
the
there
medical
are
graph.
many, many examples that we can
Agreed.
learn from, we can get inspired with. I'm completely out of time, but thank
Absolutely.
you very much, gentlemen, Mr. Mohanty,
Yeah,
Major Harsh
yeah.
Kumar. Mr. Vivek Patak and Professor Basu. Appreciate you joining us in this very, very engaging discussion. And we can hope that policymakers are listening and they will understand the importance of this very important issue of this widening education gap we are seeing in the country, and how technology can actually play the role of an enabler to help India bridge this gap. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.